everyone. So for today's video, we are going to be repotting some Aglaonema Pictum Tricolors. I imported these guys about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, and they have been doing just fine. I potted them into clear pots with a very coarse soil mixture, and quite honestly, they just aren't flourishing. So my guess is that they probably are suffering from a little bit of root rot. The stems are not as turgid as they once were. They're starting to get a little bit too bendy for my liking. That usually gives me an indication that there's something going on beneath the soil. I will show you what it looks like right now from the outside of the pot. You can you'll be able to see that the soil inside the pots towards the bottom are definitely a darker shade. So my guess is they just aren't wicking the moisture the way they should be. So I'm probably going to go ahead and repot these into a mixture of leca, sphagnum, and perlite. And I'll take you along for the whole process and show you what I discover once I pull them out of their pots. And hopefully they will take off, because we still have probably another 4 weeks or so of decent weather before I think the growing season for 2020 will come to a halt. So let's go. All right, so these are the 3 tricolors that I will be repotting. As you can see, even just from here, you can see the very dark soil with quite a bit of moisture in it in these clear pots. And the leaves look pretty good. There actually are some, there's some new growth going on there, but there's also a flower that's about to emerge. So hopefully by me repotting them, I won't be disrupting any of that new growth. This one in particular, you see how those leaves are drooping? That's just telling me that it's probably suffering from a little bit of root rot. When I did receive these guys, they had an extremely robust root system, really nice white lush roots that were really quite dense. So this is totally on me. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that I am a notorious overwaterer. I tend to overcare for my plants. So I think this will be a pretty easy fix. I think I've caught it just in time. So hopefully we can get these guys repotted so that they flourish and put on some more growth. So here we go. Also, before I pull these guys out of their pots, I just want you to notice a few things. So first of all, see the nice coarse mixture. On top, it actually looks fairly dry. I've been careful not to overwater, but I think that between the soil in these pots and the plastic and the high humidity that I have in Florida here, it's just creating too much moisture below the soil. Now, if I come down and show you close up inside what's going on in the pots, you can see actually a green tinge going on, and that definitely is some kind of an algae, which is signal number 1 that it's getting way too much moisture. And you can see also the darker coloring, which tells me that the soil is sticking to the pot. So my guess is that these roots are getting suffocated and just aren't getting enough airflow or oxygen to these roots. So we'll pull them out and I'll show you exactly what's going on. So this is the substrate that I'm going to use in my soil. Some leca clay balls, which right now are stored dry in this container. Some orchid moss, otherwise known as sphagnum moss. I'll be using one of these rubber bins to do my mixing, and I'll probably be giving a good helping of perlite just to give some extra aeration in there as well. The sphagnum moss is going to retain a little bit of that moisture, so I don't have to have it sitting in a dish of water, and the leca balls will add a little bit more aeration to the soil and hopefully allow those roots to really grab onto something and grow through them. All right, let's get going. So I have my substrate ready. I'm going to share a little tip with you that I use to mix up just exactly the right amount that I need with the right proportions. I usually have extra pots lying around that I'll be using, and as you can see here, I have an identical clear pot that I have filled up about 3/4 of the way with leca clay pebbles, probably another quarter, the rest of the quarter with sphagnum moss, and I just top dressed it with some perlite. Now, because of this mixture having the leca balls, I really don't need the perlite in there necessarily to add any more aeration. But I'll tell you what, knowing that this previously in the soil had way too much algae and moisture and turning a green color, I have found, especially in Florida where it is humid, that little bit of perlite will actually turn green if the moisture level is too high. So I actually use it a lot in my clear potting mixtures as a indicator to just for the color. If it stays nice and white, that means the moisture is good. It's being able to run through. If I start looking at it and it's turning a little bit of a green tinge, then I know that the moisture level is too high and it might be time to change it or just back off on my watering. So let's go. So this is quite interesting. The roots are not nearly as root rotted as I expected them to be, but you can tell that they're definitely losing some of their quality. And the reason I can tell is one, of course, the color. It's starting to turn that kind of mushy brown. They are not so soft that the casing is coming off, and so they are still viable. But if you can see here, and I'm going to try to get my camera to focus, but can you see that little white root right there growing off of the larger, darker root? That's telling me that this darker root here is probably not doing so well. So it's starting to send out more feeder roots at the bottom. These are younger, healthier, cleaner roots, so to speak. And we've got one there as well, and then one over here. And there are a couple small ones here as well. And that, I believe, is kind of a survival technique for these guys, because I think a lot of these roots are in fact too rotted to actually be offering the plant any sustenance. So I think it was a good decision to get it out of that soil. When I took it out of the soil, a lot of probably a third of the soil stayed compacted in the bottom, where that dark moisture and green algae was starting to form. So I definitely think that no harm will be done by moving these into a more aerated, lighter potting mixture. So let's get going. The other thing I'd like to show you guys is, so when I pick up this branch, and it's hard to do it one-handed, but it's pretty Gumby-like. If you can see, it's not taking much for me to bend it. It doesn't feel like it's going to snap. It's actually just very Gumby-like, very rubbery almost, and that tells me that it's definitely receiving too much moisture. Usually when these guys are very healthy, especially when I first received them, this stem was almost like a stick. It was pretty hard. It was almost like the trunk of a tree. So that was kind of my first indication when one of these guys actually started to bend totally over. I knew something was definitely going on. I pulled it out of the soil, and actually I'm now water propagating it. It's not one of these three. It was actually the fourth one that I received. It seems to be doing okay, but I will keep you updated on that one. That one by far was the furthest gone. But I know that these guys propagate fairly easily, and they develop really good root structures fairly quickly. So I will keep you posted on the progress of that one, as I will also do for these three as well. So you can see here, this is my second one that I'm repotting. This is the one actually with the flower that's about to bloom. You can see that the white roots that are forming are actually water roots that are forming off of the soil roots. So that definitely tells me that the water content in the soil was way too high. But on the good news side, at least they weren't starting to rot. But you can see here, they're definitely a distinct whiter color than the darker roots that I've washed off. And you can see up here on the stem, if my camera will focus, you can see that it's ever so slightly rotting around the edge just above those last roots. So we're going to get it into a drier mixture, let some airflow go through, and hopefully keep these guys from continuing to turn into water roots and eventually rotting. All right, so let me get this guy potted up and I'll show you the collection once we're all finished. Okay, so I have my 3 Aglaonema Pictum Tricolors repotted into their Lecaball, sphagnum moss, and perlite mixture in the clear pots with plenty of drainage down below. I also threw into this frame the 4th of the Aglaonema Pictum Tricolors, which unfortunately indicated to me that it was definitely in distress by almost completely bending over. It was not brittle at all. It was totally like a piece of rubber, so I knew for sure it was root rot. It also, just to be a double whammy, had spider mites, so I went ahead and cut off the rotting stem where the roots were still attached and decided to start over as far as water propagating it. I will zoom in a little bit and you should be able to see some little tiny white dots, and those are by the nodes, and that will hopefully become the new root system in time. So here, let me show you that real quick. You can see the moisture building up in these clear pots already. This is my new favorite thing, the clear pots, especially because I am a notorious overwaterer. It really allows me to see just how much moisture is being retained in the pot, and you would really be surprised. I used to test them by sticking my finger in or just observing the topsoil, and that just is not a good indication. I now make sure that I look at the actual condensation that's building inside the pot, or if it's not in a clear pot, I kind of wait now until the plant tells me it needs a drink, whether it be a slight leaf curl, or it's usually the leaf curl that'll tell me. Once you get to know your different types of plants, whether it be philodendron or aglaonema, or, I mean, peace lilies are notorious for screaming at you when they need a good drink of water. And I think a little healthy stress for these plants have actually allowed them to grow more vigorously and stronger once they do get a nice drink in the growing season. But as you can see here, see, the distortion in the water is going to kind of mess up the view, so let me pull him out. But hopefully you can see at the very bottom there, you can see that's a little white dot. There are a few of them there, and those are the starts of roots forming. So I'm going to let this guy sit in water. I change the water about every probably 4 to 5 days. I give him a very gentle clean off to make sure that there's no algae forming on the stem and no additional rot. And hopefully this root is kind of a goner, but I'm leaving him on there until he is no longer photosynthesizing. But you can see, if my camera will focus, there's a little node forming there that will hopefully be a new leaf. Sorry if my camera's not focusing, guys, but stay tuned and hopefully I'll have a healthy plant out of that one, because these guys are not inexpensive on their own. And then of course add the cost to import, the phyto certificate, and of course the risk is huge, and I can't complain. These guys came to me extraordinarily robust and healthy, and whatever condition they're in now is purely on me, because as I mentioned earlier, I am a notorious overwaterer. But hopefully this new leaf on this guy continues to grow, because look at that beautiful dark green, light green, and white variegation. And this one's even more impressive. Look at that contrast, and we even have a flower about to go. So hopefully we can save these guys, and not just save them, but really get them going and turn into a really beautiful group of 4 plants. So until next time, this is Monica coming to you from my Potting Patio Chronicles, from your wish list houseplants, and stay tuned for next time. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and I appreciate you coming with me along my plant journey. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.